Money is leaving Russian banks, not slowly, not quietly, in scale. According to recent data, $16 billion have already been pulled out, not to spend, not to invest, but to escape. At the same time, long-term deposits have collapsed to historic lows. Most new deposits are short-term or instantly withdrawable, a classic warning sign that confidence is breaking. Interest rates were pushed above 20% to stop it. It didn't work, because once money starts looking for exits, interest rates stop mattering. In Russia, this isn't fear of the future, it's memory. When banks that closed overnight, savings that vanished, salaries paid in paper that meant nothing, people remember what happens when banks stop being safe. And once that trust breaks, it never comes back on command. Banks are lending less. Bad loans are rising. Companies are refinancing at rates above 25%. This isn't a crash yet. This is the phase before crashes become visible, when people move first and institutions fail later. And in Russia, this behavior isn't hypothetical. People aren't withdrawing because something broke. They're withdrawing because they can feel it starting to. And the damage doesn't stay inside the banks. When deposits shrink, lending contracts. That's already happening. Bank data shows corporate lending slowing sharply since earlier. Refinancing is falling even as demand rises. Banks aren't short of borrowers. They're short of trust. Major banks now admit problem loans are rising, especially in construction, transport, and regional manufacturing, the core of the economy, not speculation. At the same time, borrowing costs have exploded. Corporate loans are now priced at 20 to 25%. At those rates, long-term business doesn't work. This isn't expansion anymore. It's survival. Companies can't refinance, so they delay payments. Delayed payments turn into risky loans. Risky loans tighten credit further. The loop is already visible. Banks lend less. Companies borrow short-term. Investment plans disappear. This isn't a crash yet. It's a credit freeze forming in real time. And once credit stops moving, everything above it, wages, prices, supply chains, begins to crack. And this pressure doesn't stay on balance sheets. It moves straight into daily life. As credit dries up, businesses lose the ability to absorb costs. They stop financing operations through banks and start pushing costs outward. Official retail data already shows the shift. Prices rise even when demand doesn't. Transport companies face higher fuel and maintenance bills, but no affordable credit. Retailers delay inventory purchases. Manufacturers pay more for inputs while selling less. The result is simple. Prices climb. Incomes don't. At the same time, wages become unreliable. Regional labor reports show salary delays spreading across industrial and logistics hubs. First, bonuses vanish. Then overtime disappears. Then full salaries arrive late or not at all. Companies that once ran on rolling credit now survive week to week. And people notice. Households stop saving long-term. They keep money liquid, ready to withdraw, ready to move. Central bank data shows long-term deposits collapsing, replaced by short-term, instantly. Accessible accounts. That isn't financial planning. It's fear. And fear spreads fast. Because banks don't run on fear. They run on trust. When trust breaks at the household level, the system starts failing from the inside. And once trust starts leaking, it doesn't come back quietly. Banks lose stable deposits. Without them, lending tightens. Not because borrowers disappear, but because risk becomes unbearable. Official banking disclosures already show it. Corporate lending slows. Refinancing drops, even as demand rises. Companies aren't expanding anymore. They're just trying to survive. Loans are issued shorter, at higher rates, often above 20–25%. At those levels, long-term planning becomes impossible. When companies can't refinance, they delay payments. Delayed payments turn loans risky. Risky loans freeze credit even further. This isn't panic. It's a feedback loop. Banks lend less. Businesses shrink. Jobs weaken. And every turn tightens the pressure on households again. This is how financial stress turns systemic, not with a crash, but with millions of small defensive decisions happening at the same time. And this is the part most people underestimate. Financial systems don't fail when people panic. They fail when people prepare. Panic is loud. Preparation is quiet. When households expect trouble, they don't make dramatic moves. They shorten timelines. They delay decisions. They keep options open. That behavior feels rational at the individual level. At the system level, it's corrosive. Banks depend on duration. They borrow short and lend long. They rely on deposits staying in place long enough to fund credit. When deposits shorten, that model breaks, even if total money hasn't left yet. This is why central banks fear confidence shifts more than withdrawals, because confidence doesn't come back on command. Once people learn to live without trusting banks, they don't unlearn it. They adapt. They hold cash. They use alternatives. They keep balances low. From the outside, the system looks stable. From the inside, it's starving. And starvation doesn't show up in headlines. It shows up in decisions that never get made, loans that aren't requested, investments that are postponed, hiring that never happens. Growth doesn't collapse, it evaporates. This is the phase where policymakers lose leverage, because every tool they use pushes behavior in the opposite direction. Raise rates, and people pull money faster. Lower rates, and the currency weakens. Impose controls, and trust collapses. There is no clean move left, only trade-offs that make something else worse. And once a system reaches that point, outcomes stop being managed. They start being endured. By the time it looks visible, the damage is already locked in. And this pressure doesn't stop inside Russia. It's cutting the system off from the outside. The remaining foreign banking channels are disappearing. Not loudly, quietly. Trade payments that once cleared in hours now take weeks. Fees multiply. Routes get rerouted through third countries. For banks, this is lethal. International settlements keep balance sheets liquid. When that circulation slows, banks fall back on domestic funding, the same deposits people are already pulling out. At the same time, a debt wall is approaching. A large share of corporate loans matures within the next 12 to 24 months. These loans were issued at low rates. Refinancing them now means rates above 25%. Most companies can't survive that jump. They delay payments. Banks mark loans as stressed. Credit tightens again. This isn't speculation, it's math. And once the math stops working, confidence disappears next. Normally, this is where the state steps in. A bailout, a guarantee, a show of strength. But this time, the exits are closed. Russia can't borrow cheaply. It can't access foreign capital. And it can't print without consequences. So the system starts feeding on itself. State banks are pushed to buy government bonds. Those bonds plug budget gaps. Banks then refinance through the central bank. On paper, everything still moves. In reality, value is being destroyed. This is how inflation is made. Every ruble printed to stabilize banks quietly weakens every ruble people already hold. Savings shrink without being touched. Salaries fall behind prices. People feel poorer even when they're still working. And once people feel that shift, trust doesn't return, because money stops meaning the same thing. At this stage, the system isn't collapsing outwardly. It's hollowing out. Banks stay open. ATMs still work. Numbers still appear on screens, but the foundation is gone. And this is where the danger accelerates. Not through panic. Through precaution. People don't run to banks. They move earlier. They keep money accessible. They avoid locking anything in. This behavior is already visible in official banking data. Long-term deposits are disappearing. Short-term, instantly withdrawable accounts now dominate. Cash is leaving not to spend, but to sit outside the system. That shift matters more than headlines. Because banks don't fail when people withdraw everything. They fail when people stop leaving money behind. When deposits shorten, lending shortens. When lending shortens, investment dies. When investment dies, businesses stop absorbing shocks. Nothing dramatic happens at first. Banks stay open, ATMs work, cards swipe, but beneath the surface, circulation slows. And when circulation slows, pressure moves outward. Payments delay, credit lines shrink, suppliers demand cash. Employers hesitate. This is the phase where collapse becomes mathematical. Not because something breaks, but because nothing moves freely anymore. And once an economy reaches this stage, it doesn't need panic to fall apart. It only needs time. This is usually the moment governments try to take control. Not to fix the system, but to stop people from noticing how fragile it has become. And that shift is already happening. When markets stop cooperating, rules replace incentives. Banks are quietly directed where to lend. State-owned lenders are pressured to absorb risk others refuse. Government bonds are pushed onto balance sheets, not because they're attractive, but because they're mandatory. On paper, this looks like stability. In reality, it's coercion. Capital doesn't disappear, it hides. Money doesn't stop moving, it looks for exits. So controls tighten, limits appear, transfers slow, rules change without warning. Each measure is presented as temporary. Each one erodes confidence a little more. Because once the state has to force money to stay, everyone understands what's coming next. At this stage, the system no longer runs on trust or profit. It runs on compliance. Banks stop acting like banks. Markets stop acting like markets. Signals stop meaning what they used to mean. Everything still functions technically, but the logic is gone. And when financial systems lose logic, they don't stabilize. They fracture. And this is where everything converges. Not with an announcement, not with panic, but with realization. By the time people understand what's happening, the system is already past the point of correction. Banks still open. Screens still show balances. The state still speaks confidently, but belief is gone. And without belief, banking is just paperwork. Russia can command its army. It can pressure banks. It can rewrite rules overnight. What it cannot order back is trust. Once money becomes something people rush to escape instead of store, the outcome is fixed. Recovery stops being an option. Replacement becomes the only path. This is why the real question isn't if the system breaks. It's where it breaks first. The banks, the currency, or the illusion that everything is still under control? I want to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below. And if you want to understand these breakdowns before they're admitted, before they're renamed, before they're rewritten, like the video and subscribe. We don't chase headlines. We watch systems fail. Stay watchful. Thanks for watching.